Thank you. So, what we want to do today
Yeah.
is we're going to go a little bit deeper into this idea of spirituality. Last time we saw how Judaism is a unique spiritual path, and I have to say, I was absolutely amazed by how many people clicked in on that and were interested in that. It was, May told me afterwards, something like 200 or something. I couldn't believe it. So that was really, really, really lovely. So that gave me the impetus to go a little deeper into the whole idea of spirituality. What is spirituality? And it's not so obvious. You know, if we talk to people something spiritual, they usually think in terms of something mystical. Um, and something mystical, something which is ethereal, something which is not necessarily of this world, not necessarily material. Okay, this is what people consider to be spiritual. But Rabbi Ashlag's definition of spiritual is very different. And I think it's really worth looking at because it gives us a whole new relationship to the physical world and also our own physical bodies as well. And so, in order to start off, what we're actually going to do is it's actually a piece in uh, Tapestry for the Soul. So anybody who has got the book can find it. Well, let me just find. I have to do sharing. It's really tricky to do sharings. I think we do this one, and then it admit. There you go. And then I think it's this one. Yes, here we go. All right. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to look at the what is the definition of holiness, what is the definition of uncleanness, what is the ways that the body and soul come, and what constitutes material. Now, is this the bit I wanted? Yes. This is from the introduction to the Zohar, okay, which Rabbi Ashlag wrote. Now, the introduction to the Zohar is a fascinating book, a fascinating introduction, and I was really thinking about it because when at first sight it doesn't look like the introduction to the Zohar. You would imagine that the introduction to the Zohar would be talking about Sfirot, and we'd be talking about spiritual worlds, and we'd be talking about, ethereal matters. But in actual fact, it doesn't at all. What it talks about is who we are, what we're made of, what is the body and the soul, and how we relate with those to God, how God relates to us, and what our purpose in life is about. And it's when we really look at it that way, you begin to see that the actual Zohar itself is actually much more to do with the way Rav Ashlag is bringing it in that introduction than it is to do with Sfirot and ethereal matters. Because what it's really about is our relationship with God. That's what it's about. Now, our relationship with God is real whether we are using our thought processes, which would be ethereal, or whether we are or doing some sort of meditation, or whether we're actually using something in the physical world. For example, when we take the Kiddush cup, all right, and we stand there with the Kiddush cup and the wine. The Kiddush cup is definitely physical, the wine is definitely physical, and as we drink it down, we make a bracha, we say words, and as we drink it down, you can feel the wine going down. That's definitely all physical. Nevertheless, if we're doing it with the correct intentions, that is actually defined as spiritual. So we see that that are sort of what we would think in normal life as being spiritual or physical, it's not actually what Rabbi Ashlag is talking about. So let's first have a look here, okay, in the introduction to the soul. And this is actually a piece that I took out of, it's actually showing you from Tapestry for the Soul. Anybody who's got it's on page 60. Okay? The worlds unfold until we arrive at the reality of this material world, where body and soul exist. And likewise, a time of spoiling and a time of healing. Our body, which is formed from the will to receive for itself alone, what we would call in our modern language the ego, comes forth from its roots within the purpose of creation, but it passes through the framework of the worlds of uncleanness. As scripture says, man is born like a wild donkey. It remains subject to this framework until a person reaches 13 years of age, and this period is designated the time of spoiling. Now, it's not written precisely on this page, but the soul goes through the framework of holiness, which is the framework of giving. And I actually made once a very nice sort of picture of that, which I can share with you, which is here. All right, now I can probably make it a little bigger so you'll be able to see it a bit more easily. Zoom. That's a lot better, isn't it? If I get rid of that, then you can actually see that. So how does it work? Never mind the title, I did it for something else. You've got the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, where we have the purpose of creation. The Ein Sof is the level of the infinite, where we first find manifest God's desire to give goodness to all created beings. And so that desire to give goodness to all created beings is the desire of his goodness, which is his light. And the vessel with which we need in order to receive that goodness is one. So in the Ein Sof, the light and the vessel is one. Now, following the Ein Sof, the first thing that happens, even though it's one, is that the vessel in the Ein Sof wants to become even more one with God, even more one than we can imagine one being. Now, what does it mean? The light is all giving and the vessel is all receiving. And so it can sense that difference, that sort of change between itself and the light, even though it's only a potential change, a potential difference, because they really are Hu Shmo Echad, they really are one in the Ein Sof. But nevertheless, even that tiny potential made the vessel say, I want to be like the light. I want to be a giver like the light. And it was from that decision, and from that desire, that we begin to get the difference between the framework of holiness and the framework of evil. There was the next movement was the Tzimtzum, where the light left the vessel. And when it came back, the framework of holiness said, I'm only going to receive what I can receive for the sake of giving, and what I can't receive for the sake of giving, I don't want to receive. So the will to give unconditionally, the desire to give unconditionally, that will be in affinity of form with the light, constitutes the framework of holiness. And anything which is in accordance with that desire is actually called spiritual. And anything which is in accordance with the framework of evil, what's the framework of evil? The part of the vessel says, no, I just want to carry on receiving for myself alone. If I just carry on receiving from myself alone, that actually constitutes the framework of evil. And as we're going to see, it's that which Rabbi Ashlag defines as material. Now, if we look at that, what we can see is that physicality is not an issue. It really isn't an issue. You can have like I said earlier, we can have something like, which is the Kiddush cup, making Kiddush, which is definitely a physical act, all right, using physical objects. And so long as we put our intention to make Kiddush in order to give God, in order to sanctify his name, in order to fulfill his mitzvah, in order to proclaim the Shabbat, then we are using physical objects, but it's definitely spiritual. On the contrary, you can have the framework of evil, you can have a thought. Thought is not anything you can touch, smell, feel, anything. But that thought can be evil. That thought can be material. What is material? The will to receive for itself alone. For example, you can have a thought of anger, a thought of resentment, a thought of despair, a thought of sadness. Any of those which in their basis have their will to receive oneself alone, where the ego is taking its number one place, that actually constitutes gashmiut, what Rav Ashlag calls materialization. He uses the word gashmiut. Now, I think that's a fascinating definition, because it means that the whole way we relate to our physical surroundings, the whole way we relate to ourselves, the whole way we relate to our bodies changes. All right, so many people, don't necessarily love their body the way it is, because they think it in terms of this sort of like spiritual and physical being opposites, but it's not the case. Being physical does not mean not spiritual. Being physical is just the way this world manifests. Okay, any questions? It's very interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the Ein Sof, isn't that, so you said that it's the light and the vessel are one. So
yeah.
For me, when I think about that and I try to picture that, I see it as the vessels are receiving, but they're receiving with the intention of giving. They're receiving.
That's actually correct. Yeah.
So then when you say like there's like an even inkling of separation, I don't really understand how it could come from like within the way that means. I don't know.
Okay, so first of all, it's a brilliant question, and second of all, nobody understands this.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
I mean, that's first of all, it's a brilliant question. Okay, so first of all, you're correct. The will to receive for it, the Malchut, which exists in the Ein Sof, the moment God's thought of creation, which was to give goodness to created beings, created the Malchut, it was instantly finished. So the whole of creation completely finished the moment God thought it, because from God's perspective, everything, he doesn't need any process, and the creation is already complete and completely rectified and completely metukan, exact as you said, that the will to receive in in the Ein Sof is actually already finished, and it's the will to receive for the sake of giving. So you're correct in that. Nevertheless, the Talmud Sefirot actually says we have to look at it as two parallel processes. In one aspect, the vessel is completely finished in all its completeness, but in the other aspect, it's like God kind of gave us the opportunity to participate in the tikkun. So in this other way, then you can say it's like it's kind of taken that moment between the beginning and the end and sort of like elongated it all out into the whole process of creation, which is a part that we take part in. Does that make sense? You've got kind of like two parallel systems. One is correct in that in a sense it's completely finished, it's already finished. And the other one, it's like a slow motion if kind of thing, in which the human being is given the opportunity to actually participate in the tikkun, in which case you have to consider the vessel in the Ein Sof as receiving for the sake of receiving, and then it has to do the tikkun, and we do it in actual practice. And that's the framework that we're actually in. That's where our consciousness is in. And the Zohar and the Ari, the work of the Ari, actually deals mostly with what the human being needs to do. On the one hand, though, it certainly gives us a lot of hope, because if we know that the redemption, the end of the tikkun is already present, then there's no way it's not going to happen. It's already happened. All we have to do is come to it in a full consciousness. Did that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. It was wonderful.
All right. I think that piece in the Talmud Sefirot, if I'm not mistaken, I think I popped that into Tapestry, but I don't remember where. I'll try and find it afterwards, okay, and I'll tell you where it is. All right. I'm pretty sure it's there. Okay, so let's stop showing that bit, and let's go to, there was a very good question, thank you. Let's go to, I think that's the one we want. Right. Now then, we're going to have a look at this idea of material and materialization from the Pticha l'Chochmat Kabbalah. Okay, and this is what it says. As we've said, the will to receive is inevitably included immediately in the thought of creation, with all the many arrangements that are there, together with the great bounty that God planned to bestow in order to give pleasure to the created beings. And you should know that this is the inner meaning of the words light and vessel as we discern them in the upper worlds. For they come inevitably bound together and cascade down together from stage to stage. And according to the measure that the stages descend from the direct revelation of God's light, becoming estranged from the Blessed One, so corresponds the measure of materialization of the will to receive that is included within the bounty. It's also possible to say the opposite, that according to the measure of materialization of the will to receive that is included within the bounty, so does it descend from stage to stage, until it reaches the lowest place of all, in which the will to receive has materialized to its most appropriate measure. So what does it mean? It means that the light and the vessel start off together, okay, and as they progress down through the spiritual worlds, they start to separate, and the more the will to receive becomes individuated, becomes actualized, the more material it is. The opposite is also true. The more giving a person is doing, which would be in affinity of form with the Creator, the more spiritual It is. Now, let's take a moment to look at the word spirit. All right? So the word spirit, ruchaniyut in Hebrew, is from the word ruach. Now, the stages of the soul are nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechidah. Those are the names of the stages of the soul, okay? Nefesh simply means passive. Passive means that the soul is not able at this stage to actually express itself. Let's, for example, if a person goes into a supermarket and he decides to take a bar of chocolate without paying for it, his soul might protest, but his soul can't do anything to stop him. Okay, because the person is operating with a very low level of soul. The soul is passive and cannot stop the person doing something. So which means, I mean, his conscience might prick him, but he can't actually, the soul cannot actually stop him. The person at this level has free choice. And so the level of soul, which is called nefesh, is passive and has got that it can't stop him. The person's still got free choice. But ruach is another matter. Ruach has got movement. Ruach has got life. Ruach means spirit, or it means wind. Okay, it's got, you can feel that sort of like movement there. So ruach has a definite conscious force, and ruach is the desire to give. So a person who is using his desire to give, that is called ruchaniyut. That is called spirituality, because that's the aspect that we're really looking at, okay, which is spirituality. And spirituality is the desire to give unconditionally. Now, Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag, spends an enormous amount of time in his book of articles, his Sefer Ma'amarim, actually looking at the transition that a person needs to make to get from nefesh to ruach. Because in many ways, that's the hardest thing to do. Nefesh is when we're still involved with our will to receive ourselves alone. And ruach is when we are already giving unconditionally. Now, when we're giving unconditionally, we're in what's called affinity of form with the Creator. A person who's in affinity of form with the Creator is called a tzaddik. Okay? He's a tzaddik, he's a righteous man, he's already in affinity of form with the Creator. So even though we've got 5 levels of soul, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechidah, what do we find? That a person only has to get from nefesh to ruach in order to be a tzaddik. Now, isn't that amazing? It's phenomenal. You don't have to get all the way up to there. You just one stage. That's very heartening. Not that it's an easy stage, okay? It's not an easy stage at all. That's why Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag in his Sefer Ma'amarim spends all his time, and it's like it's four volumes. I think he wrote them over about 8 years, 7 years, something like that. He would write an essay once a week, so you could just imagine how many essays there are, all from different aspects, and they are all to do with how do we get from nefesh to ruach. Because to truly be spiritual doesn't mean sitting down, having quiet meditations. It can do, that can be part of it. It can be part of our spiritual path for sure. But it also means opening our hearts and giving unconditionally. Now, one of the best ways, in my view, to learn Ruchaniyut is to read the life stories of the sages who were good at it. Okay? And who were able to, to show that when you read their stories, then you can really see what a spiritual life really means. And it's like I say, it's not to do with the physical, it's to do with giving. One of the best ways that I learn a lot about it is by reading the stories of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. I don't mean necessarily the stories he used to tell, though they're also very beautiful, the Hasidic stories, but the stories of his life. There's a wonderful book, I read it in Hebrew, it's called the Rabbi from the End of the Street, or the Rabbi from the Corner, or something. I don't know what it is in English. But it's the story of his life, and how he was so able to give unconditionally to everybody, to Jews, non-Jews, the homeless, the people in the prisons. He didn't care whether they were Jewish, not Jewish. His life was involved with giving, and he became such an expert at giving. Now for most of us, we're not expert at giving. Why aren't we expert at giving? Because our basic nature is that of the will to receive. That we come from the Malchut, we come from that vessel in the Ein Sof, okay? And if we go back a moment to our picture, all right? So we actually come from the Ein Sof, all right? And then the body and the soul comes through the framework of holiness, and each one of us have a soul within us, okay? It's a point source of soul, all right? And we all have the ego. Now, they develop differently. The ego develops first in the human being, and it's what we were looking at here. All right, our body here, which is the ego. All right, the word body and ego in the Kabbalah is synonymous, which is formed from the will to receive for itself alone, comes forth from its root within the purpose of creation, but it passes through the framework of the worlds of uncleanness. And Scripture says a man is born like a wild donkey, and it remains subject to that framework until a person reaches 13 years of age. So that would be the formation of the material desires, okay? That takes place from 0 till we are 13. It doesn't necessarily stop when we're 13 either, to be honest, okay? The will to receive can continue growing throughout our lives unless we do something about it. But from the time of 13 years of age for a boy and 12 for a girl, that's when we begin to wake up. The soul begins to wake up. Now, if you're in a religious framework, that's when you'll begin to start doing Torah and mitzvot. If you're not in a religious framework, nevertheless, you still see that the soul wakes up. Teenagers, people from the age of about 12, 13 onwards, become much more interested in the world around them, and they want to do something about it. They want to change things. They see the difficulties, and they see the problems, they see the suffering, and they become idealistic, and they want to change. Why does that suddenly wake up in the 12-year-old or the 13-year-old? Because their soul is waking up. Okay, so this desire for spirituality, which is the desire to give, begins to wake up in the person at that time. All right. Now, there's a beautiful piece in Tapestry for the Soul, and I just completely forgot about it earlier. So just give me 1 second, see if I can find it, which actually is a piece from the Zohar, which is about the development of the soul. Da, 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 da. It might be... I don't remember where it is. If I can find it, well, we'll do it. If we can't, we can't.
Yedida? Yedida?
Yes.
What's the word for spoil?
Yeah.
What's the word for spoiling in Hebrew?
Spoiling, kilkul.
Kilkul, thank you.
I think you're talking about page 154.
Oh yes, here we go. Now then, found it. 243. Great. All right, so here we go. I just have to zoom down here. 243. Oh, not quite there. And 15. Here we are. If a person comes to purify himself, they help him via his holy soul. Okay, so let's say a person wants to become more giving. How is he going to do it? Deep within him, there is a holy soul, his neshama, all right? And they purify him and sanctify him, and he's designated as being holy. But if the person does not merit and does not want to get purified, in other words, he just wants to carry on using his ego, then only 2 levels are open to him, those of nefesh and ruach. Now, nefesh is the one, the basic one that everybody has. And ruach at this point is only a point source. Because how does it function? How do we actually get from one level of soul to the next? We actually get from one level of soul to the next because it acts kind of like a staircase. Inside the basic level of nefesh, there's a point source, which is ruach, the desire to give. Okay, everybody's got that. Now the question is, to what extent does it grow? Well, it grows according to the way we use it. The more we grow our giving, the more ruach will grow. Okay? If we don't do any giving, and we just stay with our ego the way it is, and it'll just stay as a point source for the rest of our lives, and that's it. But if we grow it by our giving, all right, then the ruach will begin to grow and expand. And it grows and expands and expands and expands until it becomes like a full-fledged entity where our desire to give becomes so natural to us that it's what Rabbi Ashlag calls teva sheni, a second, becomes like a second nature, okay? Teva sheni, new nature, second sheni. And inside ruach, there's a point source of the next level. And the next level is called neshama. So you have nefesh, ruach, neshama. Okay? And then there's 2 further levels which really belong to the generation of Mashiach. or unless you're, very, very great tzaddikim, get them. And then there is Chaya and Yechidah, and it works the same way. When Neshama expands, inside that is a point source of the next level, which is called Chaya, and then you get to the full-blown, highest possible level, which is called Yechidah, and that's the level of the soul level of Mashiach. So what we see is that a person, a physical person in this world, in his material self, in his physicality, can yet reach total spirituality through his desire to give unconditionally. Now, isn't that amazing? What an amazing thought. And you don't have to be a great, prophet. You don't have to be a great, anything. You can be just yourself in your own situation and cultivate your desire to give unconditionally, because that's the definition of holiness. That's the definition of spirituality. All right? Is that clear? All right? And this is what it says here, this bit. Since a person is born only with a nefesh of the world of Asiyah, how can he be helped? And the answer is that Ruach is always included with nefesh at the time he's born, as stated here. So the person is nefesh and Ruach, and Ruach at this point is only a point source, but Neshama Asiyah is required only according to his deeds, and this is so at every level. Now, there's a beautiful piece of Zohar, which I found here, which contains terms which, quite frankly, you can't translate. But I love it because it's in this rather esoteric piece that it's possible to see the incredible potential hidden within every human being, and to wonder at the high level of holiness a person can achieve. Okay, now I'm not going to read out the holy names of God, all right, but we can follow them with our eyes. Now, come and see. When a person is born, they give him or her nefesh from the level of the animal. That's our animal nefesh. That's our, the fact that our heart goes tick-tock and we can breathe and things like that. Okay, we share that in common with the animals. But we get it from the side of purity. Okay, from the level called Ofanai Kodesh, from the world of Asiyah. They give him or her Ruach from the level of Chayot Kodesh, from the world of Yetzirah. And if the person merits, they give him or her Neshama from the level of Kisei, from the world of Bria. And these three are called the Amah, the maidservant, the servant, the Eved, and the handmaiden of the daughter of the king. Now, this is like, who can understand this? I can't understand this. It's not possible, but we can at least enjoy it and, wonder at it. So we've got the Amah, the Eved, and the Shivcha, the daughter of the king. Then a person merits further. They give him or her nefesh from the level of Atzilut, it's a very high level, from the level of the daughter of Yechidah, who's called the daughter of the king. That is the Malchut of the world of Atzilut. He or she merits further. They give him or her Ruach of Atzilut. That's from the middle line, which is Tiferet, called the Son of the Holy Blessed One. As it is written, you are sons to the Lord your God. He or she merits further. They give him or her Neshama from the level of Bina, as it is written, and he breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, Nishmat Chayim. What is life? It is the letters Yud Hey, of which it is written, Kol HaNeshama Tahalel Yud Hey. And so the name Yud Hey Vav Hey is completed by them. For Ruach and Nefesh of Atzilut are Vav Hey, and the Neshama of Atzilut is Yud Hey, and together you get Yud Hey Vav Hey. And he or she merits further. They give him Yud Hey Vav Hey, furnished with letters as is follows: Yud Hey Vav Hey, that has the inner meaning of Adam. So what is an Adam? An Adam, the full meaning of Adam is somebody who is really in total affinity form with God. This is in the fact, Rabbi Ashlag writes in another place, Adam is Adameh le'elyon. I am like God. In other words, just as God is unconditionally giving in joy to us, if we can be unconditionally giving in joy to God and or to our fellow human beings, we are an Adam. This is in the form of master, for whom it is written, and you shall have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the bird of the heaven, and over every creature that creeps on the earth. This is Adam, who has governance over the firmaments, over all the Ophanim, over the Seraphim, over the Chayot, over the Sfaot, and has all the powers of above and below. For this reason, when a person merits nefesh at the level of the daughter of the king, it is written, you shall not go out in the manner that servants go out. Now, everybody, this is a beautiful piece of Zohar, but I can't understand it. I mean, you've got to be really, really, a great Kabbalist to be able to understand it. But I can't understand it. I'm not reading it here so that we can understand it. But just to see what potential, what spiritual potential lies within every human being. And what it needs more than anything else is simply practice. Practice in giving unconditionally. Now, in order to, before we go, what I wanted to do next was to look at, I think it's, how do I do this now? Share screen. There. And it's here. Was that the bit I wanted? Can't remember. Ah, yes. This is the bit I wanted. Now, Rabbi Ashlag taught his students to put the emphasis on the inner, the emphasis on giving. All right? And so I thought we could have a look here at what he meant. The poverty in Rabbi Ashlag's household, this is from the new book, The Master of the Ladder. The poverty in Rabbi Ashlag's household was enormous, okay? They really didn't have two coins to rub together. He concentrated only on his work. So the students would bring the necessities of life so the children would have something to eat. All right, okay. And once he said, materialism and spirituality are complete opposites. The whole world is chasing after the material. What does that mean? They're wanting to fulfill their will to receive oneself alone. And whoever doesn't have material goods feels distress. He didn't mean the physicality again. It means that fulfillment of the ego desires. But this is true, what he writes next. But when a person attains material fulfillment, he isn't satisfied. He feels empty. Now, why is that? It's because fulfilling our will to receive for ourselves alone is actually, we fill it with what's called nehiro dakik. It's a sort of the light which is given to the framework of evil to sustain it. What does that mean? If there was no light in the will to receive, in what supplies the ego, we wouldn't bother with it. Nobody would bother with their ego if there was no light to be involved there in their egoism. There wouldn't be any light there. Okay, so nobody would bother with it. We're all light, we all want light. All right, but what's given in material terms, which fulfills our will to receive for ourselves alone, is called sparks. All right, they're sparks of light. And it's exactly that. They flare up and die. You know what it's like. We've all had this experience where we really, 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 really want something, okay? And we get it and we're really happy for a little bit. And then it's gone. And we wondered what was all that about. Okay? And that's it. And this is what happens when a person attains the material fulfillment, like in other words, he's fulfilling his will to receive from himself alone. He's not satisfied, but he feels empty. In spirituality, the matter is the opposite. All right? When we've done something lovely, we've given something unconditionally to somebody else, years later, you can lie in bed and feel good about it. All right? No one in the world feels the lack of spirituality, per se, because we can live without it. And in fact, we need to work on ourselves a lot in order to feel a lack in this manner. But whoever merits to attain even the tiniest contact with God merits exceeding happiness. So, inner and outer aspects exist within each one of us. The inner aspect is our desire to give, which is the soul, okay, which is that source within us that we've just looked at. The outer aspect is our will to receive for ourselves alone, okay, and they exist in each one of us. And in his Rabbi Ashlag's introduction to the Zohar, which is also in Tapestry, by the way, now you must know that everything has an inner aspect, which is the soul, the spiritual part, the desire to give, and an outer aspect, which is the desire to receive, which is the ego. Now, if we're to look at the world as a whole, Israel, the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is considered to be the innermost aspect. Why is that? It's because we are able to give unconditionally. This is a function that we received through our forefathers. Okay? This is a special tchuna that we were given through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the reason why God gave us the Torah, because we have the ability to carry it out. All right? And before the Torah, we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will obey. We came as one to Mount Sinai. You can't, you know, when everybody's just wanting to use their ego, you end up separated. They cannot come together as one unless you are giving to each other. Only unconditional giving binds people together. And therefore, when the Jewish people came to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, they came using their spirituality, which is their desire to give. And that's why we were able to receive the Torah. Whereas the 70 nations, the other nations of the world, are considered to be the outer aspect of the world. Now, the inner aspect and the outer aspect are also represented within ourselves. Okay? He goes on to say, within Israel itself, there is an inner aspect which consists of those people who are seriously committed to their spiritual work of serving God. And there's an outer aspect consisting of those who are not involved in spirituality. Likewise, among the nations of the world, there's an inner aspect which consists of the saints of the world, those who wish to be giving and kind and loving. And there's an outer aspect which consists of those who are destructive and coarse. Even among those of Israel who serve God, there's an inner aspect and an outer aspect. Those people who are privileged to understand the soul of the innermost aspects of Torah and its secrets comprise the innermost aspect of those who serve God, whereas the outer aspect is made up of people who deal with only the practical aspects of Torah. Now, in similar fashion, these two aspects may be comprehended within each individual person. Each individual has an innermost aspect, which is the aspect of Israel within him. This is the soul. This is the point of divine light within the heart. This is his source of spirituality. This is his source which gives him the desire to give. And he also has an outer aspect that corresponds to the 70 nations of the world, and which relates to his will to receive. These internal nations of the world, that's our wills to receive, do have the capacity for transformation. And when they do transform, they can then cleave to the innermost divine part of the person's soul. And that's what we say in the Shema, V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha, with both parts of ourselves, with our inner part of ourselves, our desire to give, which is called the Yetzer Tov, and our desire to receive, which is also called the Yetzer Hara, okay, which is both parts of ourselves. So when we do transform those outer nations of the world, then they can cleave to the innermost divine part of the person's soul. And then these internal nations of the world become like righteous converts who join with the community of Israel within the person. So we have tremendous potential. Even our ego aspects, even our wills to receive for ourselves alone, can transform and join with that soul and help that soul within us enlarge, get better, have more power, have more aspect to it. Like I say, the best way to really see this, I think, is in the stories of the sages. There's Rabbi Shlomo Kolbach. There's another one whose stories I read many times. Aryeh Levin. Now I know there's a book in English of his life. I'll put that on the chat a moment. Can I do chat? Yes, here we are, chat. Rabbi Aryeh. Oh, it didn't type. Why didn't it type? I told it to type. Rabbi, that's it. Aryeh Levin. I can't remember what the book is called. Tzaddik of Our Time or something like that. It's an amazing story. He was
a saint among men, I think.
Ah, you found it?
A saint among men.
Oh, really? Okay, great.
So, yeah.
But I mean, he was the rabbi at the time of the British were here in Israel, and he was the rabbi of the prisoners. All the British took a lot of the Etzel and the Haganah, those who were fighting to liberate Israel from the rule of the British, which was totally necessary because the British blocked the refugees coming into Israel. And so he was the rabbi of the prisoners, but he didn't just visit prisons. He visited people in the hospital, and everything for free. I mean, he didn't require any salary. He was a poor man, but he did everything from love. And the stories about him are unbelievable. So that was the story of Rabbi of Rabbi Aryeh Levin. Now, how did I get here? Oh, I think it's just, yes, here we go. The thing just moved down. There we go. So, yes, a person may reinforce and respect his innermost aspect, which is the aspect of Israel within him, over his external aspect, which is the aspect of the nations of the world within him. And then he strives to put most of his energy and labor into increasing and enhancing his innermost aspect for his soul's sake. Now, when we work for our soul, we're not just working for us. We're all connected. If anybody works to increase their soul's spirituality, he's actually increasing the world's spirituality, because we're not individual. We look like individuals, but we're actually not. We really are one soul. So if an individual person puts the effort into increasing his own spirituality, the spirituality of all the world goes up. All right? Oh, there's something on the chat. Don't quite know where it came up and then I lost it again. Oh, here we are. Chats, full things in chat. Oh. Ah, right. Okay, so there's a couple of things here. Reba says it's yes, the book is by Simcha Raz. Thank you. Yes, it is. That's right. And Devorah King says, let me just, I don't know how, Devorah, can you change that for everybody? I'm not familiar with this book, but Devorah recommends there's a wonderful book about the length some people can go in giving, and it's Holy Woman, Robertson Kramer. No, I don't know it, but thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, send it to everybody. Yeah, sure. And then we could all look at that, because these books really give you an idea of how much one can do, and we learn from each other. That's how we learn. And like I say, even what we're able to do, who we are in our own little circles in giving, or we work, like to increase our own spirituality in this way, we actually increase the world's spirituality. We help all the world go up. And right now, the world needs it very badly indeed. So, anything we can do is going to be good. All right. Right. Now, there was, I think that's pretty well, that's pretty well actually what I wanted to bring. Okay. We did a lot today. All right. Is that okay? All right then. So listen.
Thank you.
All right, you're very welcome. Let me do the stop sharing. I'm going to do so. There you go. I can actually see.